this lesson, is that by the end, you will be able to describe the basics of the MCAT itself, the sections that it's divided into, and the Kaplan MCAT course that you are a student in. And before we go on to the next page in your book and the next few screens, I want to describe what this is here on the screen. This is a learning goal. You might be familiar with these from other classes that you've had in the past, but every lesson in this lesson book and many other resources in the course will have these. These are what you will be able to do after the lesson if you understand and absorb everything in it. In other lessons, you'll see learning goals like use the answer choices to your advantage, remember the right science content, use formulas efficiently on test day. But because this is the first lesson and we're just getting you in line with the next weeks and months of your MCAT prep, it's about describing the MCAT and the course itself. And we'll move through those two items in reverse order, actually. So let's move on to the details of the Kaplan course itself. Get yourself oriented. You're here for a reason. You want to succeed, but what do you want to get out of this course? What are your goals? What do you want to be better at the end of this course than you are right now? Well, whatever that is for you, we want to accomplish that and more, because we know what the MCAT demands, and this course is going to get you better at 4 classes of things, all of which the MCAT demands you do well. And each of those is aligned with a course objective. First, and this one should be no surprise, you're going to get better at the science content that you've been studying in your undergraduate classes. When the MCAT demands that you remember the right physics or orgo or biochemistry content, you're going to be able to do it. It's also going to get you ready for the test itself. There are many special ways of thinking and strategies that are going to get you success on the MCAT specifically, and that's going to be one of our major specialties. The third item is stress management, managing yourself and your own mind around this monster of an exam, dealing with the stress that comes with a high-stakes exam like the MCAT and everything building up to it. And this one, fourth in line, but no less important for it, this course is going to give you the structure and resources you need to spend your study time efficiently. The average MCAT student spends over 300 hours preparing for this exam, which means you need high-quality resources focused on exactly what you have to study to spend those 300 hours and maximize your score out of it. Speaking of those resources, let's do a quick rundown of those now. We're going to see each of the broad classes of resources and how to best use them. We'll also see how they align with those 4 main objectives of the course: content, test strategy, stress management, and study planning. These first 2 resources are going to make up the vast majority of the before class work that you do before each of your class sessions or before you watch these lessons on demand. Those are your MCAT review books, those 7 great colorful glossy books that you got in the mail, and watching the science review videos that we've made as companions for the most visual and highest yield content. These 2 resource types are really going to drill down to the content that you need for the test. Not only will these resources get you a base of content in the first place, but you'll be able to come back to them and to use them to really drill down on your weaknesses later on in the course, to do targeted content practice. The next 2 resource types, it's a little odd to call them resources because they're live experiences. One of them is your class sessions that you'll be spending with your teacher, or again, watching here online. And the other is the MCAT channel, which you'll be able to attend if it's included as part of your course package. Both of these allow you to learn from Kaplan teachers, usually live, and ask them questions. These sessions, especially the class sessions, are going to focus on test strategy, performing on test day, but really, you're going to learn all 4 major objectives from these live resources. The next set of resources is practice, 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 practice. And that includes both the full-length exams, including the practice the AAMC themselves, the test makers, have released, and all of the other avenues of practice that you have. Now, you might be thinking right now that full-length exams and simulating test day is going to be most of your practice, and it is going to be very important. But do not discount the use of all the other types of practice questions that you have. You've got the Q bank, you've got passage-based questions. There are a lot of questions in the back of this very book that you'll be doing after you watch or attend these sessions, along with the questions that are found in your review books and in the science review videos as well. Doing more and more and more practice, especially full-length exams, is going to get you better at strategy. It's going to get you better at stress management because you're going to get used to the experience. And these are good study planning resources because you can structure your schedule, structure your week, for instance, around, well, I'm going to take a full-length exam on Saturday. Very good study planning resource. But honestly, practice is going to help you with content review as well, especially because the passage-based questions, the Q bank, and the practice in your books and videos is all going to be content specific if you want it that way. And finally, let's not forget about it, your flashcards. Included as part of your Kaplan enrollment is our flashcards app for iOS. And the great thing about flashcards is, yes, they help you remember content, but also they're a great study planning tool because that's how you can spend just quick 10 or 15 minute chunks of time. You can just take out your phone, your tablet, and work on memorizing some extra key terms. So now you see what's in the course, consider these for yourself. Which of these seem the most interesting to you? Which of these are you looking forward to doing? Or if you've already done some, which of them are you looking forward to doing more of? Now let's talk about the MCAT itself, and we'll start with its scoring scale. As you can see from the image here on the screen and in your book, each of the 4 sections of the test is scored on a 15-point scale centered at 125. Those 4 sections then add up to a total score, which is on a 56-point scale centered at 500. But let's dive a little deeper to see why everything here is shaped like a bell curve. We're going to zoom in on a few specific scores now to see where they lie on the curve. But before I give the game away, consider what you already know. A 500 is an average score on the exam, but what do you think is a good score on the exam? Well, whatever your guess was at that, we're going to look a little more in depth into the score distribution right now. This isn't a linear scale. It's not like just as many people score a 480 as a 500. In fact, because the MCAT is scored on a curve, the most people score a 500. It's the most common score on the exam. That's why the test maker calls that the top of the curve. It's also called the 50th percentile, meaning that if you score a 500, you're scoring better than 50% of other test takers. And to get a sense of what some other scores mean, working your way up, a 505 is about the 67th percentile, or you're in the top 1/3 of test takers if you get a 505. A 510 is about the 80th percentile, or you're in the top 20% of test takers, and a 515 is about the 90th percentile, or all the way up in the top 10% of test takers. Now, interestingly, there's still a lot of numbers in between 515 and 528. There's a lot of room at the top, if you will. But because of the way the test is scored, most people score somewhere near a 500, plus or minus 10 or 12 points. And honestly, that should be encouraging for you. What it means is that if you're scoring around a 500, maybe a little more, maybe a little less, most students are in that range when they take their diagnostic exam, it means that even just getting a score improvement of 2 or 3 points can mean that you leapfrog over a lot of other test takers because you're in a very crowded neighborhood score-wise. It means that every little point will end up counting on the test. And while you're thinking about your own score and your diagnostic, let's do this exercise on the bottom half of this page about your target score and how you can get there. Now, you may not know your exact goal score right now, and that's okay. If you do know your target score, you should write it on your page right here. But if you don't, then there are 2 pieces of information you need in order to get a sense of where you are. You need to know your diagnostic score, where you're starting out, and what your target schools want to see. Now that's going to take some research. That is something you do have to go do. And you don't have to do that this very moment. You can come right back to this page. It'll still be here. You can dog-ear it and bookmark it to come back later to write down your target score. But it's really important to get calibrated with that difference. Where are you now and where do you want to be? And whatever that's going to be, even if you don't know your goal score yet, take a moment to fill in the next blank on your page. What are some obstacles, some things that might prevent you from doing the kind of studying and improving on this test the way that you want to? Now here on the page it says 3 biggest obstacles, but even just 1 or 2, jot them down right now. Take just 10 seconds to write them down on your page. Now, I don't know what you wrote here on your page. There are no wrong answers, but whatever you wrote, you might have said you're taking classes, you have a job right now, you're worried about test taking, you haven't taken all the classes you need, prerequisites. I'm going to tell you what goes in the next blank. The way you overcome those obstacles is that you follow the program. There are about 300 hours of prep for you to do in order for you to really get the score you deserve on the MCAT. And working at this program, using the resources you have, going to class, asking your teacher questions, that's the way that you do it. Anything that's going to get in the way of that, scheduling conflicts, a big score increase that you want, really tough exam week at school, for instance, you've got to take action to manage around it. Maybe the score increase you want is 5 points. That's about 1 point per section, a little more. Maybe it's bigger than that. Maybe it's 10 points. Maybe it's 15 points. But I guarantee you, we have seen every single score increase in the world. We've seen people go all the way down from the lowest scores all the way up to the top of the curve, 90th percentile. And that's because they review the science, they get good at the test, they manage their stress, and they plan their studies sensibly according to the program as in front of them. You got to make a study plan, you got to find your motivation and keep hold of it. If you need a good motivation, remember what your MCAT score is going to do is get you into medical school. That performance on the test is going to mean a lot, but you're going to be ready for it. So let's see what that test day is going to look like. For the last portion of this lesson, we're going to see what's going to get thrown at you on test day in terms of timing, in terms of question style, in terms of content, and in terms of skills, and how these lessons and this lesson book is organized to get you better at those. First, the timing of test day. Not going to go through this line by line, but notice that there are the 4 sections of the exam. They're each about 90 minutes long, 90 or 95 minutes. You'll have breaks in between each one. Notice there's a longer break right in the middle for lunch, but it's all going to add up to quite a long day, over 7 hours. So take a moment to consider just how impressive what you're going to do is going to be. Yeah, those football players, they play in the Super Bowl. That's only 3 hours long. You are going to kick butt on the MCAT, which is more than twice as long. A whole day that is going to prove how prepared you are for med school. Now, how about the content you're going to see, at least on the science sections of the exam? Well, this diagram here on the screen and in your book is that outline as given to us by the test maker. Some highlights here are where the numbers are the biggest. You're going to see most of the general chemistry, organic chemistry, and physics on what's called the Chemical and Physical Foundations section, or Chem Phys section. You're going to see most of the biology focus on the Biological and Biochemical Foundations, or Biochem section. And you're going to see biochemistry on both of those 2 natural science sections. So even though it's only 25% of each section, it really does add up. Then you'll see the psychology and sociology on what's called the Psychological, Social, and Biological Foundation section, or Psych-Soc, or sometimes Behavioral Sciences section. Note that you will see more psychology than sociology, 65% to 30%. Gen Chem, OChem Physics on Chem Phys, biology on Biochem, biochemistry on both of those sections, and then psychology and sociology on the behavioral sciences section. There are some smaller numbers here and there, But that's the basic framing of the science content for the exam. And I assure you, your Kaplan resources are structured with these ratios in mind. If you even just look at your review books and how thick they are in relation to each other, it's just about gonna match these percentages across sections. We want to make sure you spend the most of your time on the highest yield science content. Now that doesn't mean you completely ignore physics or organic chemistry. You really need to shore up those subjects if that is where the opportunity lies. But a big picture of the exam and what that content base is going to go a long way. And speaking of your content base, even if you haven't done a lot of specific MCAT science review yet, you probably have a pretty good idea of your strengths and weaknesses. So given just these broad subjects, Gen Chem, Physics, Biochem, and so on, which of these subjects are you most looking forward to getting better at and improving that section? Next, let's see the structure of the sections themselves in terms of question types. You're going to get really familiar with these numbers between now and test day, but the basic facts are that the science sections, Chem, Phys, Biochem, and Psych, Soc, have a mixture of passage-based and discrete questions, which are going to stand alone, across 10 passages and a few sets of discrete questions. Whereas the CARS section, critical analysis and reasoning, which is like a reading comprehension section, is going to be all passage-based questions with 9 passages in total. But of course, if the MCAT were only content, well then it would just be like a final exam in a science class. But the MCAT is much more than that. It also tests skills. And skills are a defined term by the test maker. What skills are, it's not what they're testing you on, but what they're asking you to do with that science content. On the 3 science sections of the exam, there are 4 main skills the AAMC will test your content in the context of. There's skill 1, or science knowledge, skill 2, or science reasoning, sometimes called critical thinking, skill 3, or research design. Those correspond, by the way, to chapters 1, 2, and 3 of the book you're holding, the lesson book that you have. That's why we don't start on page 1 of this book and just go to the end, because you should be testing skills in a mixture and jumping around between them in your prep. Skill 4 on the science sections is data-based reasoning. That's going to be chapter 4 of your lesson book. But there's also a chapter 5 of this book, and that's because it's not just about the 4 skills the test maker says you need. We know, and you know too, that you also need to be ready for the MCAT itself. You need to be ready to deal with MCAT-style questions, with MCAT-style passages, with section management. That is what we call Skill 5, or MCAT expertise. And you're going to be spending a lot of time building MCAT expertise in your class sessions and in your homework, because you're going to be able to draw on that expertise for test day. In a lot of ways, that's what the 300 plus hours of MCAT study are all about. When you have hundreds of hours of experience and you've been building expertise, those 7 hours on test day, they're going to be nothing, because you've seen it all before. That's what chapter 5 and those chapter 5 lessons are all about. But before we go, don't forget about the CARS section. Many med schools, in fact, weight scores on the CARS section higher than any of the other 3 individual sections because it tests critical thinking directly. So you've got to get good at these skills too. The AAMC tests 3 distinct skills on the critical analysis and reasoning section: foundations of comprehension, reasoning within the text, and reasoning beyond the text. And you'll see lessons on those question types and skills in chapter 6 of this book. But yes, MCAT expertise is just as important in the CARS section as well, and that is chapter 7 of your lesson book. To finish up the structure of your book itself, there's also chapter 8, the chapter you're in right now, which is about facts about the test and managing around it. This is the chapter that's going to involve this lesson about basic facts about the test in your course, but also